Hello and welcome to Cryptid Spotlight, the Spottsville Monster. For those of you keeping track, this is episode 2 of the 4th season of Cryptid Spotlight. As many of you are already aware, last week when making the Cryptid by State video of Kentucky, I came across this real strange story. At first I didn't give it too much thought since it was about a Bigfoot, and I tend to keep those topics in the honorable mention section. Then I happened to read the full encounter, and quickly realized that this cryptid was so much more than simply just another Sasquatch story. With my content, I will talk about any type of creature, but I've always shied away from Bigfoot due to there being so much information out there that is constantly being rehashed, and I feel there are already people who dedicate their studies to it and know way more than I do. From time to time, I will talk about Bigfoot, but normally only if I have something new or interesting to say, or if a certain topic is highly requested, like my Patterson-Gimlin video. With today's topic, it marks all the boxes for being a Bigfoot, but also being different enough that I feel I can talk about it. So let's get into this. Out of all the cryptids that are said to roam about the world, very few of them actually have a huge number of people believing that they exist outside of their home areas. Now, Bigfoot is different in that regards, since there are many believers, but also quite a few skeptics who are open to the idea of it actually being a real thing. Of course, there are a lot who don't, but those numbers are vastly different when compared to those of most all other cryptids. So with its popularity, over time the Sasquatch has had many proposed theories as to what exactly it is. Some of the more scientific ideas see it as a flesh and blood animal, much like a deer or bear, while some say it could be a lost ancestor of humans, or maybe even an undiscovered primate, much in line with the often discussed Gigantopithecus. Outside of the scientific realm, theories have emerged to try to explain the creature's elusive nature, such as it being an interdimensional being, that it is a pet of extraterrestrial entities, or even that it actually is an alien species. These last two have been brought up since many Bigfoot sightings are linked with UFOs in an area, and also there are a few encounters where people have claimed to see a Sasquatch-like creature interacting with alien life forms. Well, for the most part these are simply nice ideas that have not a lot of information backing them. That is, until we look at the story from the town of Spottsville in Henderson County, Kentucky. Our story begins when the Nunnally family moved into their new home on Mountain Ridge Road in 1975. The family consisted of a man named Red, his wife Rose, and their 6 children. From all accounts, Red was fairly straightforward and wasn't the type of man to be frightened of anything. He stayed steadfast in this, even though the previous owner had warned them that there was a strange creature lurking in the forest, and even at one point saw a large, hairy creature standing right outside his front door. This previous tenant stated that in his sighting, he grabbed his rifle and fired quite a few bullets directly at the being, but even though the figure filled the doorframe, none of the shots seemed to hit it. Not to mention that no blood was found later on. Even with a warning like that, Red was confident that his shotgun would be sufficient enough to remedy any issues that dared to show its face. The family set up a farm where Rose could grow vegetables and Red planted tobacco plants. In the springtime, things started to become really weird on the property. Quite a few of the family's chickens disappeared, but it was simply ruled out as a fox or weasel being the culprit. Then, a few of the children began finding the bodies of dogs lying in the field. What makes it odd is that they were discovered to be torn down the belly and the eyes, tongue, and internal organs had been removed. To make the situation stranger, there wasn't any blood on the ground, nor any footprints to be seen in the freshly tilled soil. Also, even though the bodies were out in the open, no predators had made a meal of it, and not a single fly was trying to land on it. Things would start to ramp up when at night, the family would hear strange unfamiliar sounds, sometimes coming from the forest, while other times it seemed near the house. Even the family's hunting dogs, who were known to be fearless, would scurry under the floorboards anytime the sounds were present. All of these things combined started to get to Red, since he wasn't so confident that his shotgun would be enough to stave off whatever seemed to be in the forest. Due to this newfound fear, and from his failing eyesight from glaucoma, Red invited his oldest son Harold and his family to set up a home at the property to help out and possibly be another gun in case something bad happened. Not long after this, the family noticed a man walking towards them from the forest with a rifle in his hand. He waved to show that he was friendly and came up to the porch to talk. This man identified himself as Ray Vibert, who was a fireman in Henderson and lived about a half a mile up the road from the family. He came to tell the family that he was hunting squirrels when he came across a large furry animal that ran away on its hind legs, and he felt it was his duty to warn all his neighbors about seeing this odd beast. Pretty quickly, Red and Ray became good friends and would frequently spend time together at the farm. One day at 8 o'clock, Rose went out to the porch to call her son Harold and his 3 kids in for supper. It was then that she noticed a large 8-foot-tall, black-colored figure just standing inside the tree line. She screamed, which caused Harold and Red to come running with guns in hand, and she retreated inside to call the police. The 2 men searched the area and couldn't find anything, and the police also didn't see any evidence. These occurrences happened frequently after this point, and each time the police came. However, eventually they grew tired of the calls and started to refuse to show up. Rose saw this creature later on at dusk run from the forest towards her garden, and it even jumped over a fence that was set up. Later, Red was tending his tobacco plants when the same type of creature came charging at him from the forest, and he managed to find safety in the house. The family's 10-year-old son named Dean was standing by the garden when he heard something loud crashing in the forest. This was then followed by an unsettling quiet, like the calm before a storm. Looking around, Dean finally caught sight of what was making the sound, and it was the same creature everyone else in the household had seen. Although this time it was light enough out that he was able to give a real good description. It was 8 feet tall, had a square jaw, small, close-set red eyes, and it was covered in patchy, reddish-gray fur. Of course, after this sighting, Dean ran away. Later on, the children were playing near the cornfields when they saw the same creature stand up and stare at them. They claimed it actually towered over the full-grown corn stalks, which normally grow to a height of 8 feet, which would make this creature extremely tall. After all this, it garnered the attention of news stations and reporters who traveled to the farm for the whole story. It was during this time that papers such as The Gleaner started to spread the story, but also got some of the story wrong. This is where many claim the creature had green fur, which was never said before, and they even stated the wrong location of the sightings, which caused so-called monster hunters to search in the wrong areas. With these stories, it caused the family much turmoil and ridicule, and eventually Red would simply send reporters to their neighbor. This would then turn into a strange twist that I'll get into later. While this was all going on, Ray vowed to try to hunt down the creature for the safety of his family, as well as the Nunleys. On one such hunt, he came across a small, old, run-down shack in the middle of the forest. As he drew near, Ray was shocked to see the face of the creature peering back at him through one of the house's windows. Ray pulled up his gun and fired, but the creature simply dematerialized in an instant. The monster didn't run away. It was just there one moment, and the next it was gone. Later on, Ray did claim to find evidence of the creature in the way of fur, a claw, and even a half-footprint cast, which showed it had a large human-style foot, but with only 4 toes. With Ray out hunting the monster, the story took a fascinating and puzzling turn. One day he was out in the forest when a massive rainstorm hit. He found refuge in an old abandoned barn, but come to find out, he wasn't the only one. As he turned to look around, he saw the familiar form of the creature that he had been hunting, and it was standing at the end of the barn, just staring at him. Terrified, Ray was unable to move as the beast walked up to him, still staring at him with those famous red eyes. Ray was a 6-foot-tall man, and when this creature stood next to him, its stomach was at eye level. In a shocking twist, the creature didn't attack, but it instead spoke to Ray using telepathy. It simply said, "Don't be afraid, I won't harm you." Then the creature turned and ran out the other side of the barn. Even though it was raining and the ground had turned to mud, Ray wasn't able to find any prints left by the monster. Ray told Red of this encounter, and the father of 6 asked if he thought this creature might eventually try to take any of his family. Ray stated that he figured the creature was content with killing livestock and scaring people, but if it ever grew restless, nothing would seem to be able to stop it if it chose to become violent. It is said that after this revelation, Red decided to keep a bucket of kerosene near the door in case the creature did attack, and in his mind it would be better to set the house on fire with his family inside rather than have the monster take any of them. It wasn't long after this that the Nunley family, only after a year of living on the property, packed up their things and moved to the city. By the time the family moved, they said that the creature continually stalked the house and much of their livestock had been killed. According to papers, 16 chickens went missing, 1 goat, 1 horse, 8 dog carcasses were found, and 1 pig. When the bodies were recovered, all had been found much like was said about the dogs, with torn belly, no organs, eyes, or tongue. I should note that during the previous events, there were many sightings of strange UFOs around the same area. I don't really want to mention that as a side note, but it is worth telling you about. Yet, there is never a story where the monster and UFO activity are directly related. It just adds an interesting what if. The story doesn't end there, since activity continued after the family left. Ray later claimed that while out for a walk, he saw a circular patch of field that appeared to be radiating heat. As he watched the spot, he says that a creature similar to the one he saw in the barn on that rainy day emerged from an invisible portal, which he described as a doorway. It is possible that it could have just materialized, much like the one he saw disappear at the old shack months prior. The creature caught sight of Ray and growled, and telepathically he heard the beast yell, "Leave me alone," before it vanished from sight again. Ray claims that he kept an eye on the spot for many weeks, and during that time he saw at least 3 other similar beings emerge from it. Through the following years up until 2004, Ray stated that he saw the monster around his house many times, but they tended to show up around dusk. Every time they would come near, they would set off his motion sensor light, and he would get a good glimpse of them before they'd run away. As stated, Ray had acquired some evidence proving the creature existed, but to date hasn't come forward with any of it. Not to mention that if you look up the old articles, he is quite adamant in his statements that what he saw and was hunting was a large bear. This seems really odd to say the least. According to Ray, when the story first made waves with the press, he says he was approached by the police, who asked to see his evidence, and when he showed them, they confiscated it. They then warned him not to retell the story or mention anything about the monster. If he didn't comply, they said he would be arrested on false charges and would never see his family again. At first, he didn't take the threat serious, but the pressure became too strong and he released a statement to the paper that you're probably seeing now, about the creature being a bear. Ray asked for his evidence back, but kept being denied until one day his family returned home to find a bag on his porch, which contained the crushed up remnants of his plaster cast he had made out of the footprint. While this type of behavior isn't something new, you always have to wonder why, and note how convenient additions to the story like this is. That is, until looking into the full history of the area, and noting that sightings of a similar creature go back way farther than what the Nunleys encountered. Not to mention that at that same time, Bluff City and Hebbardsville were also contacting the police about this monster. Especially when the media was moving in, it is feasible that they would want to shut those stories down. So that was the full story of the Spottsville Monster. Since those sightings, people to this day still claim to see the creature from time to time. I find it fascinating that this Bigfoot could appear and disappear at will, it was shot at twice and wasn't affected, rarely left footprints, and that it apparently could speak telepathically. One of my viewers named BT069 told me that a similar story also happened in Montana, so when I get to that state, I'll be sure to tell you about it. Before ending this video, I did want to mention that this story does have some conflicting information. Some claim Ray's name was Roy, while others say Red Ray and a third unnamed neighbor had encounters. Some state Ray had a terrible vision of the monster killing his family, and this is when he told Red to move out. I can't find that story anywhere, but I did see a movie was made about the events, so maybe it was included there for dramatic effect. Also, some say 200 chickens were killed rather than 16. The Nunleys encountered the creature for only a year, so buying 200 chickens in a year, especially after they kept getting killed, seems expensive and a highly unlikely number. 16 was in the original article, so that seems more reasonable and what I went with. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you could share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.